your flesh and blood.
Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I thank you for joining us here on the program as we get set to dive into another fun subject here on this program that brings you new paradigms for a new world, giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., and Wednesdays at 9 a.m. for a special edition of Tell Me Your Story. We also podcast on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and other locations. Way too many to mention here on the program, but we certainly encourage you to do so, to check out all of the good stuff that we have to offer to you on the video casts as well. Same thing there at YouTube. And you can go to the YouTube channel or any of the other channels, as I've already mentioned, for the podcasts. And we hope that you'll do that. Also hope that you'll spend some time going within, listening to that still small voice, and just kind of being peaceful in that quiet, peaceful, calm space during the decade of perfect vision. And then if you'd like to support the work that we are doing, if you can do so, we'd greatly appreciate that. Then all you have to do is go to PayPal. It's there for your security as well as ours. And when you do submit a contribution, which we are so grateful for, they're going to ask you for an email to whom to send it to. That's right, to whom to send it to. And that's Richard at richarddugan.com. That's Richard at richarddugan.com. With all of that said, we have a very special guest here on the program. Her name is Karen Herrick, KarenHerrick.com. And we're going to talk about her latest work, Psychology of the Soul and the Paranormal, developing a richer appreciation for life through spiritual experience. And of course, over the last couple of years, many people have experienced grief and loss in one form or another. And the overwhelming anxiety, fear, and depression surrounding grief and loss can keep a person stuck in negative patterns that affect their entire lives. And while some people experience deeper levels of these patterns, such as addiction and substance abuse, more and more people are reporting to have had a spiritual experience that has transformed their lives for the better. Karen, thank you so much for joining us here on the program to talk about this.
Well, you're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Well, Karen has spent, decades researching spiritual phenomenon and how this information impacts mental health and overall well-being, and the need for education, mental health professionals, for educating mental health professionals on these experiences. Now, first of all, I am glad that you make reference to, and I'm glad you use the term mental health and mental wellness, as opposed to the other way around, mental disorders, mental disease, that kind of thing that is sort of trying to pinpoint, what the heck is your problem kind of thing. Whereas we've been through, oh my gosh, each one of us has been through the ringer, so to speak. Folks, if you don't know what the ringer is, Google it. It has to do with washing in days gone by. The whole aspect of dealing with the spiritual realm here in the material world, as I'll put it that way. Do you think that a lot of folks have been having these experiences, but they are at such a level of awareness and understanding that for them it's just normal? Whereas for some folks who are just in the workaday world, 9 to 5 kind of thing, their main concern is putting food on the table, gas in the car, keeping a roof over the head, etc. And they have something like this, it kind of freaks them out.
Well, let's see. The statistic is, and I just want to correct, my name is Herrick, Herrick.
I stand corrected. Karen Herrick.
That's good. Okay. So they say 40 to 50% of the population in the United States and Great Britain are having some type of spiritual experience. I don't think most people know what that entails. And sometimes they feel like it might be mental illness, and so they don't talk about it. For instance, somebody who has a near-death experience, which that term was coined in 1975 by Raymond Moody, so it's certainly been around enough. The average time for somebody to talk about that experience is 7 years after they have it.
Oh, wow.
So they walk around, thinking that they're crazy and trying not to act crazy, whatever that means.
Hmm.
And then their divorce rate is 79%. Somebody who's had a near death, mainly because when they come back, they're so excited about the light and the people they saw, and um, they talk about it all the time. And so their wife, their spouse, their husband, they don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it anymore. It doesn't make sense, and it's nuts, and just stop talking about it. So their values change. They want usually better relationships, whatever that means to them. They don't know, but they're going to find out. So the values change, and maybe they don't want to be like an architect and make over 100 grand a year. Maybe they want to go down and work at the local hospital and help people who are having these kinds of experiences. And so
Mm.
then, people in their family aren't happy because their standard of living is going to change. And what do you mean? I mean, you're really acting crazy, you know?
Yeah. Well, I also know too that some folks who have experienced some of these traumas that kind of put them in that place of vulnerability. Is that a fair assessment with everything we've been through? Let's just say in the last three to 4 years, that some people, they're kind of raw and they're very vulnerable. And I don't want to say that they're open. It's just that by virtue of their vulnerability, they're open to these experiences, and not that they're asking for them per se.
Right. Okay. So open, that's a good word. People that come from a dysfunctional family are more open to have a spiritual experience because they've had more trauma. Maybe they've been beaten, maybe they've been incested, maybe their parents were alcoholic. Very chaotic. You can't depend on one day after another what's going to happen. Um, so those people learn how to disassociate as children and on up. And so then if they're in a car accident, they're going to dissociate and leave their body easier than somebody who just came from a family where everybody was, kind of nice, and, we didn't have every day being different like a Holocaust.
Hmm.
So if you can disassociate easier from coming from trauma, you have a better chance of having a spiritual experience. It's almost a gift that they get. And my definition of a spiritual experience, one, is a transcendent relationship between a person and a higher being, sometimes going beyond a religious affiliation. So nobody in your religion has told you something like this could happen, but you're like in awe because it did happen.
Mm-hmm.
And you saw this being, maybe angel or somebody with light around their face, so you couldn't even tell who it was, but you certainly knew it was somebody very spiritual and important. And they said
Mm-hmm.
important things to you, or you met your grandparents, or all kinds of people that have gone before us, so are now spirits. And it was lovely. There was music and pretty flowers, and it smelled good, and they were in the clairvoyant reality. And that's something you and I are talking today in the sensory reality. Everything is, black and white and past, present, and future. But the clairvoyant reality is where these things happen. So you can have precognition and seeing angels and seeing your loved ones that have been are deceased. All these different things, and usually only happens to one person at a time. So we don't have a lot of people watching this happen.
Mm.
And so now we have developed characteristics for different kinds of spiritual experiences. So we can tell you if you come in. I mean, if a if a therapist is trained in that way, and that's what I am doing with my webinars online. Different therapists come on, and they learn about the different kinds of spiritual experiences. They learn about, just like what I said about the near death people, 79% get divorced, and nobody wants to talk about it for 7 years or a lot of years. And so then they know as therapists, they have to be more validating, and they have to know a little bit about these types of experiences that can happen. So I hope to keep teaching larger and larger groups about it.
We are talking with Reverend Karen E. Herrick, PhD, LCSW, LMSW, and then she has some others there. Completed her master's degree at Rutgers in social work and a PhD at Union Institute and University. She's the founder of the Center for Children of Alcoholics and has shared her clinical experience for 30 years in private practice by lecturing on dysfunctional addictive homes, disassociation, and grief, as well as loss. We're talking with her, and we're talking with her here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we're talking with Reverend Karen Herrick. And we are talking about, well, the paranormal. It is, Doctor, it is not, or Reverend, I should say, Reverend Doctor. I'm Reverend Dr. D for Dr. D. Dugan. But this is not an area that I've really delved into much in the 15 years I've been doing this program. It's not that I haven't felt it wasn't important. It was just, it seemed like most of the time when people want to talk about the paranormal, it's like the ghosts and evil spirits and all of that kind of stuff, moving stuff, and those kinds of events that you see in a lot of the horror movies that are out these days. But that's not the perspective that you're coming from when you're talking about psychology of the soul and the paranormal. That's not your definition, is it, per se?
No, I'm coming from our psychological spiritual ancestors, William James, who was the father of American psychology, and he studied mediumship in the early years, early 1900s, due mainly to the fact that he and his wife lost a toddler child, and so Mrs. James went to different mediums because that's what you did then. Mediumship was really big from the last part of 1800s to like 1910, 1929. And she pulled him along, and they found Lenora Piper, who was his white crow because she was so right on and gave such current and useful information. And then they studied mediums at Massachusetts General. They called them mental healers. And I do recommend for clients that are in chronic grief that they have a medium visit and go and see which loved one is going to come in and talk to them so that they can connect this bond that they think they've lost with their loved one. And then Carl Jung, who's another spiritual ancestor from Switzerland, and he developed analytical psychology. His mom was psychic, and his grandfather was also psychic and had a second wife, and they would sit at lunch and talk to the first wife who was on the other side. So Jung watched all this, and he was used to all these different levels of consciousness. So he believed in mediumship also, a little different than James, but they both believed in it. Excuse me. So anyway, when you go to a college and learn about psychology, you don't learn about this part, which I think is so unfair. That both of them were trying to teach us that we can talk to spirits, and that most spirits are usually good. Now, Jung believed that if there were trickster kind of spirits, they were just immature people, which makes so much sense, who are out there kind of messing around, and they haven't seen the light and they haven't gone toward it yet. So he just made it so real and so down to earth. And there's so much, what I want to say, knowledge that has come from mediums that have written about different spirits that have come in. And there were psychologists in England and the United States, and they would sit in on these seances. This was before television, when you didn't have anything else to do anyway. So we're studying what the spirit said, and very well-known spirits who died came in and said what it's like over there on the other side. So we have lots of research. Um, I don't think this research will ever be done in a lab that you could say, I want to see my deceased mother and she's going to come in a laboratory. I don't think so. You're going to see her in your bedroom where you're connected by a loving connection. And so we need more clairvoyant researchers also to really study and let you know that spirits are just people who don't have bodies anymore, and they don't talk, but they can send you thoughts, and they do send us thoughts daily. And especially if they love you and they're worried about you, and love is the greatest connection there is. It's the highest level of energy, and that's what attracts the spirit to you. And you'll believe that the deceased wanted to come back to help you, and it would also help them, because at one number one, it gives them a purpose. Lots of spirits have unfinished business. Maybe they were taken too soon and they have things they want to tell you. Some spirits just want to tell you, like your grandmother, where she hid the money in the attic. Don't sell the house till we find the money. I mean, we've had all kinds of messages like that come through to mediums and psychics. And it's very exciting, really, when you get to not be afraid and know that they're just people.
Well, and the reality is, of course, that they once were actual physical people
That's right.
inhabiting bodies. I had an experience, and I guess this could be considered paranormal. My eldest sister passed away just about a year ago, at the end of March of 2022, and I got the phone call. At first, I thought they were going to tell me it was my father, and after the initial shock, I started hearing her voice basically saying, "Hey, Richard, it's okay. Everything's okay. Everything's good." Now, the great thing for me was that I was able to have a conversation with her in January of last year, prior to her passing, asking her point blank, and I found out later that she did not shy away from the tough questions. I said, "Are you ready?" And she said, ironically, yes and no. I'm going, what? Come on, yes and no. She says, no, because I don't want to leave my husband behind, which I understood. But she said, I'm not afraid. I'm ready. And I'm wondering if that's sort of the, I don't know if I want to say goal necessarily, but for lack of a better word, through the work that you're doing with some folks, not everybody, to demystify and to help them to not fear death,
Yes.
because that's one of the biggest issues. My father, he is 91 and not doing so well. We don't know that he's going to make it another 6 months. I don't know if he's afraid. I haven't had a chance to ask him, but I'm not. It's like, if today's my day, Karen, I'm good. Is there more I want to do? Oh my God, yes. I want to
Right.
live to be 100 and I'm only 62, okay?
Right.
But I don't have any control over that part of it. So let me ask you about that. And in terms of people who are struggling with this whole concept of shedding the mortal coil, if you will.
If they're afraid to die, is that what you mean?
Yeah, and how do you help them to let go of that fear, or I should say, maybe more importantly, work through that fear?
Right. Well, I try to get them to read to I'll give them information that I have and from the book, The Psychology of the Paranormal. Um, and just give them as much information as possible. One of the things that I do give them, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there's a Netflix special called Surviving Death. And I think it's a couple years old now. And they
Hmm.
have 5 1-hour shows in there. The first one is on near death experiences. And they're all PhDs who have had near death experiences. And that's lovely. But I would like everybody to know, hey, you can have one too, and you don't have to be a PhD. But anyway, but they validated these. So, they're real. They've been tested by all kinds of paranormal scientific people. So please watch that show for 1 hour and
Hmm.
write down some questions you might have or some things that really hit you, And which ones did you like? Because some of those stories are just so beautiful and calm. Because when you're released from this physical body, and that happens going up the vagus nerve, which is the 10th and longest nerve in your body, from the crown of your head to your stomach area. And I won't get into all the physiological thing of that, except that the vagus nerve starts to vibrate and becomes a highway, and your spiritual body is located, that has your soul. You have two bodies, and that's news. And you ought to write that down. Everybody, you have two bodies, and try to figure out what I mean by that. But the spiritual body holds your soul, and the job of the spiritual body is to take your soul over to the other side, because your soul was not born; it was created, and it needs to go back there. And now your physical body is created, when you are conceived. So when you are conceived, there's also an atom placed in there, and the physical body grows around it. And so the spiritual body is growing as the physical body is growing, but it's a little miniature view of you. And they say it's egg-shaped when it comes out of the physical body. And so it's made up of atoms and protons and chemicals and all kinds of stuff. I mean, this hard body here that we're sitting in stays. And then this spiritual body goes out the top of your head, up the vagus nerve, out the top of your head. And there's a silver cord that also goes out the top of your head. Now, if you're going to die, that silver cord stops vibrating, and then you just go, because your spiritual body is not affected by gravity. So you just go up.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, now I've forgotten what I was trying to explain to you. I get so involved in my answer.
About going out of the body.
And not being afraid.
Yeah.
And so the near-death show on surviving, death on Netflix can show you how that happens. Now, that's what's so great about the near-death people, is that they have been there and came back. Now, only about 20% of them go and meet their grandmother and see the flowers and the music and all that. But that's wonderful that we have 25% that will come back. Some people just leave their body, kind of roam around and come back in, because the silver cord does not cut or stop vibrating. So the silver cord is it says in the Bible that once that is cut, you are deceased. Just knowing the process, just like we understand the process of birth, this process of death happens over and over and over again. And I recently talked to a medium who's very clairvoyant and had worked on ambulance for 15 years. So she had seen people in traumatic death and just regular death, dying in your bed. And she knows how everything goes up the body. And I asked her, if I sent her my book, the paranormal book, would she look at the illustrations and tell me if that's what she sees? And she said, wow, nobody's ever written down what I see, and this is it. And she was so pleased so you have illustrations there that actually show the different parts of your body and how it works. Just like being born, there's a way that happens over and over again that you die. And it's easier, I think, to die, because I have experienced my original birth through some holotropic breath work that I did at a conference. And I'll tell you, it's hard coming in, because you're pushing and pushing and pushing, and it seems like nobody's helping you.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like you're holding onto a rope and someone's pulling you up the cliff, up the face there.
So my answer to you, though, is they need to educate themselves. And Freud said so many people are afraid of death, they won't even talk about it.
Yeah.
So if that's the problem, they're never going to learn.
Exactly. I've had some interesting experiences, not out of body or near death, but I went through LBL, Life Between Lives hypnosis. And,
great.
Fascinating. And I've read Newton's 2 or 3 of his books and the case studies. But I will tell you, the first person that comes to my mind when I think about out of body and paranormal and so forth, and this is one of many that starts to come to mind, Edgar Cayce. Ruth Montgomery is another, and these go back to the 70s and early 80s.
That's right.
And it just is fascinating. And then it even goes further back than that, about 2,000, well, not even 2,000 years, to the story of Lazarus, but then also to the admonition by Paul that it is appointed to every man once to die, and then the judgment. Well, if it's appointed that every man wants to die, what's the deal with Lazarus? Or was that before the rule was put in place? And it also begs the question, at least in my mind, what is death? And I will tell you that, and we're not going to get into the subject, but in order to, in my observation, in order to resolve the issue of when life begins, you have to know when death begins. If you don't know when the body is dead, is not coming back, that's when you're going to know when life begins. But I still have that question about Lazarus. Was he dead? Was he in a coma? Was he faking it? I mean,
See,
I wouldn't.
I have an answer. I think he was in a coma, and but Jesus, I think, was a medium. So Jesus could bring people back to life if he was, dead, and the silver cord had not been cut.
Yeah. Well, the whole subject is perplexing for a lot of people, and I get that, and I understand it, and I want to be respectful of their perspectives as well. We're talking today with Reverend Dr. Karen Herrick, PhD, and we're talking about the work that she is doing through a book that is now available for you through her website, KarenHerrick.com, KarenHerrick.com. The book is Psychology of the Soul and the Paranormal, developing a richer appreciation for life through spiritual experience. One of the authors that I'm familiar with, Karen, is a Catholic priest from the 30s. His name was Johannes Graeber.
Okay, I don't know.
And he wrote a book called Communication with the Spirit World of God.
Okay.
But he also channeled the Spirit's interpretation, if you will, of the New Testament. And a specific passage that ties into what we're talking about, I think is appropriate to mention here. And it says, where it says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and all his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Well, in Johannes Graeber's translation, which I have a copy of, it says, seek ye first communication with the spirit world of God, and all these things will be added unto you.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And I thought, okay. And the thing that happened when my sister passed last year, I came to the realization, okay, she's not in the physical body. Now she's everywhere. I can, and I may not hear her audibly in my ear or anything, but I can talk to her because she's everywhere, just like every other person that I have known who has passed, has left the body, I can talk to. Do you help people to learn how to, at the very least, maybe not communicate, in other words, have a literal conversation back and forth, at least recognize and accept and maybe begin the process of verbalizing, hey, Jeanette, I really miss you. I hope you're doing well. I wonder what you're doing. Of course, me going through life between lives therapy, I know what she's doing.
Right, that's great therapy.
Yeah. And I say she because that's the only reference point that I have.
Right.
Because that's another interesting element too. There are no, as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, there are no sexes. There's no delineation between male and female in the spirit world. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And by the way, I did some research, and I remember this from biology class in high school. When we come into this world, every single human being who ever has, will, or has, is, or will exist came into this world and started out in the early stages of development as female.
Yes.
And it wasn't until the DNA information was imparted that then the decision was made, or what have you. Male, female, male, female, male, 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 female, female. And I find that, this whole argument over this issue of trans, that's another subject for maybe another day. But somehow I feel as though individuals who are on the other side and came into this world, I don't know, maybe they contracted it, or I don't know if a mistake was made, or if it was, again, part of the lessons that they're supposed to learn. Any insight on your perspective on that?
Yeah, just let me correct what I just said about no sex over there.
Okay.
When there is male or female presence when they come back to the medium,
Right.
so they can tell whether it's a man or a woman.
Right.
There's no physical sex at
Right.
all. It's just there's just love there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and yes, I think everybody makes a contract before they come in. I also believe in reincarnation, so we've done
Yeah.
this many times because it takes, as Jung said, it takes more than one life to create a soul, and you have to live many lives and many different personalities in order to, make your soul bigger and happier and make yourself known to your soul. And that's what he did in his therapy that I love. And he said that you have everybody comes in here with a purpose. So you had a contract, you're going to do this, and you're going to, everybody picks their parents. And I can't believe that, but that's true. And that really helped me when I was a parent. I thought, you picked me. So now we're doing this. But anyway, and it's all done up there. And then when you come in, you forget it. Now, sometimes you can, in a dream, you can see a past life where you can actually, an angel could tell you a little bit about, hey, you're supposed to be going this way. And your name can be called out loud. You can hear that. So that's a very normal thing. But it takes a lot that your sister's energy has to be pretty good already over there that she could make it or verbalize. So yes, we all have a contract. Your job is to come in and find out what the purpose of your soul is. And in therapy, as we're getting rid of all the negativity that maybe you have in your life and trying to fix certain things, what Jung believed and is that the your unconscious becomes smaller and your consciousness greater because we're talking and we're getting all this stuff out, writing letters, we're screaming at people, in the chair, that kind of stuff. That your soul then can come up from the base of the unconscious and you connect more with your personality and you'll have more passion for life and you'll know more about what you want to do and your intuition becomes greater. And that's also given to you intuitive thoughts from spirits on the other side who care about you.
Oh, that's so cool. We're talking today with a fascinating woman. She's done a fascinating work called Psychology of the Soul and the Paranormal, developing a richer appreciation for life through spiritual experience. She is Reverend Dr. Karen E. Herrick, KarenEHerrick.com. We will be linked to her website as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and the conversation we're having right now, Doctor, is and of course I keep jumping around, don't I, to different reference points to you, but I did that with my last guest too. He's a doctor, and I kept saying Andrew, doctor. Cannot make up my mind. Anyway, I'm curious as to this aspect we talked about, life between lives. Like I said, I think of, and I have to say that people like an Edgar Cayce in particular, and I know there are others as well, who have in their personality, they have a particular belief system. He was a born-again Christian, and yet he chose to have these channeled experiences. And what that says to me is it doesn't matter what a person actually believes per se. If there's an experience they're having, and I've interviewed a born-again Christian who practices out-of-body experiences, it gives me hope for the future of mankind because it says that many people, and we all believe differently. I mean, you and I, we could call ourselves exactly the same thing. Oh, yes, I believe in that philosophy. That's mine.
Right.
But if you're experiencing seeing spirits in your room and they're embodying your parents, your sisters, your brothers, your friends, what have you, and I'm, let's just say, doing out-of-body experience, it says, oh, then you and I, we may have that fundamental belief, but we're also open to expanding our awareness beyond what it is that we currently believe until we can realize that, oh, that belief no longer serves me. Took me 5 years. I worked for a Christian radio station, and it took me 5 years to release myself from the concept and the beliefs surrounding the devil and hell, because it didn't make any sense. Because what it does, with, in my opinion, on my observation, okay, I'm not putting this on anybody else, and I want to be respectful, it makes God out to be an extortionist. You are going to do it my way, or else you're going to hell, and you're going to burn in fires, and so on and so on and so on. And that's, again, that's from me. That is, I don't put that on anybody else. Let me ask you about that in terms of people who you work with, and even some people that you've studied and through your research, and how their belief systems have changed through some of these experiences.
Yeah, well, what I think happens is that they get to realize that heaven and hell are really more energy states than anything. So that if you go up to the other side and you've committed suicide per se, sometimes somebody who's committed suicide is very depressed and into, this is going to show them nobody gave it to me enough and blah blah blah. So they're so involved in their self-reflection of how horrible it was. That's hell. So they get up there, and there are spiritual guides and angels who are always there for anybody to help them see what happened, see what their contract was and how they did not fulfill their contract. In fact, the first thing that you do in the first 3 days of death is you have a life review on the other side.
Yeah.
And so they say it's like a movie of your whole life. And sometimes it's from other lives too, so that people have come back, the near-death people that have had this review, and said, oh, I had 3 other lives. So now I believe in reincarnation, which they didn't believe before they went up. So you have a life review, and you see your life and in a perspective of how you hurt other people or made them happy, right? So it has to be a very humbling experience. And there's no judgment up there. The only judgment is you judging that. And then they try to work with you as to what the contract was and, you know, what happened. And and then heaven is up there because it's all love. And there's no duality like down here. Down here is duality. That's what people come here for, the good and the bad, and your messy life that it's your job to figure out and make unmessy so that you can be happier.
Mm. It reminds me of the movie with Meryl Streep and Albert Brooks, Defending Your Life.
Oh, I love that movie.
Absolutely. And I love Meryl's character, who is just having, and this sounds like an oxymoron, just having the time of her life. And Albert is freaking out because he thinks he's going to be judged.
That's right.
In fact, it is, as you just stated, it is nothing more than, we're just reviewing. We're just taking a look back and seeing what you did. There's no judgment here. You know, I have to say that when I went through the Life Between Lives therapy, I still remember that the life right before this one. I almost wish I could go back to that one, but I tell the story of how I was on a farm, I had a farm and cattle and so forth, a small farm, and it caught fire and everything burned to the ground. And I just happened to have a cabin up in the mountains. And then I find myself up there, and I walk out the front door of the cabin, and I sit down in the chair. And this is where it gets kind of interesting. I sit back in the chair, tip my hat back. I just sit there going, oh, it's been a good life. It's been a good life. And then I just leave. And I knew all the people in the town associated with the farm and had good relations with everybody. And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I'm going, that's what I want. I don't want any more of this drama and this craziness. And, you know, it's like, and I'm not saying that I run away from it, but it's like, enough already. You know, you want to get into an argument and you want to do that. And I did that at the Christian radio station because, you know, I was trying to get my point across.
Right.
it's like it's not worth it anymore. It's just not, and I just don't want to go there. Now you
Right.
say we come here because we want to experience the duality, and I have been for the last 10 years. And by the way, been doing this program for 15, interviewing for over 40. And I I basically have come to the conclusion that there is no duality. And the reason I say that is this: if you take a look out into the universe, you see how the universe functions. You see what happens out there with supernovas and things colliding and things building and growing and going small and black holes, all this stuff. There's no judgment out there. That's just what happens. It is what it is. And if you now turn inward to the microscopic world, you see kind of the same thing. My personal belief is that the inner and the outer worlds, macroscopic and the microscopic, are mirrors of each other. But there's no judgment there either. It's like the COVID virus, the way they portrayed it, they showed it. There's no judgment there. It's just doing what it does.
Right.
Just like the red blood cells, white blood cells are just doing what they do, et cetera, et cetera. But when we come to this, what I call the mid-crow world, there's all this judgment. And it's like I've come to I haven't incorporated or grokked it into my being, but it's just what it is. There's no judgment here. These are just experiences that we are having. They're not good or bad. I even was challenged, and I made the statement to someone about mistakes.
Right.
I've never made a mistake in my life. I have only had learning experiences.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say, that people would say, well, I've had bad things happen to me. So have you learned from them? Right. That's the key, right?
Yeah.
We're given that so that we learn. And some of them seem like so not phenomenal, but so huge that we're never going to do it. But step by step, and having positive thoughts and getting some help, because some people just need some support. And many times that's just, a willing ear, that will listen to them and then give them some, positive advice.
I used to go to mediums, and I got to a point where when I would go, I wasn't going there to ask them questions that I did not already have the answers to. I hadn't yet completely trusted my intuition, which is what I want to talk about. I was going there to get confirmation, not to get answers, but to get confirmation of what I already knew. It's like I just need a little nudge. Okay, I'm getting there where I'm starting to trust my friend. That's what I call it.
Right.
But I'm not quite there yet. So could you just give me a little. And now it's like second nature to me, and I don't take it for granted.
Right.
If I'm driving, or if I'm doing a project, or whatever the case might be, it's like, oh, that way, okay, and away we go. I've even had situations, and I share this too with folks about. That's why we talk about the decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, where we ask people to go within. And I share this story with them where I had this prompting to do something in regards to my finances. And I'm going, no, no, that is totally contrary to my plan for my economic well-being. And it just persisted. It wouldn't go away.
Right.
And finally, all right, okay, I'll do it. And I did it. And when it was all said and done, a few days later, I realized had I not done that, things would have been much worse in that respect.
Right.
So I say that your still small voice, whatever you want to call it, will challenge you, but it will not put you in harm's way. Do you believe that?
Oh, absolutely. I have a quick story if we have time.
Yes. Yes.
I was at a conference in New York City, years and years ago. And, when you go to a conference, you have your best clothes, and I always had a portable computer and my best jewelry and all this stuff. Anyway, after a few days, a friend of mine, we get all this stuff in the car, and we're going to go down to Lower Manhattan to have, to the Village to have lunch. And so we get there, and we find a parking spot on the street. And when I get out of the car and look at the car, I have this thought: this car is going to be robbed. So I say to my friend, I think we should let's go to New Jersey and eat on the water and, you know, oh, come on, we got a parking spot and we're going to go shopping and come on, it's not going to be robbed. Okay, so I allow myself to be talked out of that. And so we come back, put the stuff in the back seat, we get home, lift the trunk, it's completely empty. All my stuff, my favorite thing. So anyway, so I had this angry thought that small voice of mine, it's too light. It needs to be louder. And then after a couple of days, I thought, no, Karen, you need to be quiet and you need to listen because you had the answer. But that really helped me so that now I know what's intuitive and what isn't, you know? Now, I don't know if everybody has something like that, but you just have to keep practicing and you make mistakes by saying, oh, yeah, that's the way to go. Let's go that way. And how come? And just keep track of that. How many of your ideas were good, this week? And how can we, get more intuition? And I think, of course, it's through being quieter and not having so much mental activity. When I had my breath work session where I felt this Holy Spirit go through me, what they told me was, don't think, just breathe. And that's a good idea for all of life. Don't think, just breathe, go out and do gardening, take the dog for a walk, sit around and just, enjoy the music. Don't do anything. And your intuition will get better and better the more that you spend with yourself.
Yeah, I would agree with you. The more we trust, and the only way we're going to learn to trust is to trust.
And to make mistakes, though.
True. You're going to learn.
That was a big mistake, right?
Yeah. The story I tell of my intuition, aside from the one I just shared, was I used to bicycle everywhere when I lived in Phoenix. And I was living at that time in a trailer, and I was about, I don't know, 5 or 6 miles away from the transmitter site. That's where we broadcast from back then. And so there I am, I'm bicycling away, pedaling along. And this was out in the middle of farm fields, which were a mile square. Okay. And so I'm tooling along. The street was actually called Van Buren. And I'm tooling along Van Buren, and I'm crossing 67th, 75th, coming up on, getting ready to come up on the station. And all of a sudden, the prompting says, turn left at the corner. And then go up, and then turn right, and then go to that corner, and turn right, and then go to that corner, turn left, and continue on Van Buren. And I'm going, but that's going to take me 3 miles out of my way. I went half a mile down Van Buren past where I was supposed to turn left. The prompting would not go away. I turned around. I went back to that intersection. In this case, I made a right. Then I made another right at the next corner. I made another right at the next corner. I made a left back onto Van Buren and continued on my way. I have no idea why, other than the still small voice, or my friend, was saying, do you really trust me? Really? Right. There's no accident you're going to avoid. There's nobody you're going to come across that's this, that, or the other thing. This is a test of trust. And that's something that you are talking about as well when you're listening to that still small voice inside, right?
Yes, absolutely. And you're getting that information from your guardian angel or spirit guides or your deceased loved one. They're sending thoughts to you. And one of the things Jung had, when he was doing his dream work, he had a guru called Philemon. And Philemon said to him, you're such an arrogant person. You think that every thought in your head is yours. And that's not true. So that's another thing to kind of think about. Is that my thought, or are they sending me that thought?
Well,
you have to have faith that somebody is sending it.
Yeah, and that brings up a book that I have carried with me. It was given to me at the age of 21 by a dear friend of mine who has also passed. I knew her for 40 years. And it's called The Impersonal Life by James Banner.
Okay.
It was written also in the 30s. And it talks about that very thing in one of the chapters. You think that what you're thinking is yours.
That's right.
Wrong. It's not. It's mine. and so on and so on and so on. Fascinating stuff. We're talking with Reverend Dr. Karen Herrick here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and Reverend Doctor, I thank you so much. I love talking with a fellow Reverend Doctor. It's so wonderful to be with you and to talk about this subject. I'm hoping that folks will go to your website, which is KarenEHerrick.com. We will be linked to your website, and people can
Great.
find out more about the work that you're doing. Pick up a copy of your book, which we encourage people to do. The title of her book is Psychology of the Soul and the Paranormal, Developing a Richer Appreciation for Life Through Spiritual Experiences. By the way, my mother asked me once if I'd ever had any. And I said, well, I wouldn't know, because if I did, to me, it was probably normal. I think about that in terms of, for example, Jesus, the things that he did. They were just normal to him. They were no big deal. He
Right.
knew how to do them, and he just did them. So if I have had them, I don't know that I've had them. But I sure as hell am having a great time in this life. And I want to thank you for being a part of my life and this program. I really do appreciate it.
Well, you're entirely welcome, and I've had a lot of fun talking to you.
And I have 3 final questions for you. I ask all my guests as we wrap up this edition of Tell Me Your Story. And those 3 questions are in this order. Number 1, who is Karen E. Herrick?
Let's see. I'm a mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother. I am a therapist. I am a friend. I am responsible. And I have a good sense of humor.
What is your life's purpose?
My life's purpose is to teach people how to have a more positive life.
And finally, what was your best day?
Oh, I do think I did this once. My best day is kind of wandering around in a trance, like at a museum or out in the woods, and just enjoying myself, maybe having a good sandwich in my backpack and coming home to my dog and relaxing. That's my best day.
Very cool. Well, Reverend Dr. Karen E. Herrick, I thank you so much for being with us here on the program. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to having you back again, because I think that this is a subject, like many of the programs I do, the subjects that needs to be repeated, that needs to be talked about further, and I hope we can do that one day.
Sure, anytime.
I'm Richard Dugan, and I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We're here Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and we stream live at those times at richarddugan.com. Our podcasts are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and many other locations. We're on YouTube, where you can watch these interviews. We hope you will. Subscribe. We are getting lots of folks who are listening. They aren't subscribing, and that's okay. The numbers are not important to me, folks. You have to understand, truly, they are not. If I only had 1 subscriber, and it was me, but if I saw that there were a lot of folks listening and watching the interviews, that's what's important, is that the information's getting out there. So maybe click notifications so that you get notified when a new interview is posted. We also ask that if you would like to participate in the Decade of Perfect Vision, it's easy to do. The 2020s is the time period that we're talking about right now. But we ask you to go within, sit quietly in that still, quiet, calm, peaceful space, and listen to and follow the promptings of the still small voice, whatever your name for that still small voice is. And if you'd like to support the work that we are doing financially, we would greatly appreciate that. We have a PayPal account. It's there for your security as well as ours. And when you do submit, we ask you to use the email to whom you're sending it to, richard@richarddugan.com. That's richard@richarddugan.com. With all of that being said, thank you so much. And until our next podcast, videocast, love to Lal. And Jeanette, yes, I am still listening.